There's been a lot of talk about the need for new housing in Bloomington Normal, a 7,500 unit shortfall at last check. There's also been a lot of attention paid to barriers, such as high interest rates, bank skittishness on loans, and construction costs. And yet, the town of Normal gave at least early approval last year for the development of more than 1,400 new units. In this interview with WGLT's Charlie Schlenker, town planner Mercy Davison says there is stuff in the pipeline, but there's a long lead time for such projects.
Well, we certainly had a lot of proposals that came to the council and were approved. Lots of multifamily units were approved in 2023, and we saw a lot more interest in that sector for obvious reasons. We approved final plats for about 185 units. That does not include, though, the preliminary approvals on a couple of large multifamily developments. So they were also approved in 2023, but they don't have that final approval that they need. So if you add those in, that's another 477 units for Carden Springs planned unit development and 136 units at the Archer planned unit development. The council also approved a very large subdivision of multiple types of residential called Infinity Point on the west side of town. They approved that as a preliminary plan. And ultimately, when built out, that would have up to approximately 400 units. But as of yet, they haven't gone to the final platting process. So it's two different numbers, what's been final platted and what's been preliminarily approved.
Compare that to historical averages, would you?
I would say for multifamily, this is considerably more multifamily residential approval outside of student-oriented types of multifamily. So in the time I've been here, we have not seen this many multifamily projects come through in a calendar year.
And what are you thinking about for this year?
It really comes down to land availability and what properties are undeveloped and for sale. And I don't know the answer to that. So in this past year and a half, we've just seen a few fairly sizable chunks of ground that became available, and that's when the development proposals came through. I really don't know what that's going to look like in 2024.
Does it look like the marketplace is responding to the articulated need for housing in the community?
I would say yes. Again, this is the first time we've seen this kind of proposal for non-student-oriented multifamily development, and that must be because the developers proposing it see the opportunity there and see the need. That's why they're doing it.
There's been a lot of talk about how the marketplace factors of higher interest rates, banker reluctance, and in some cases, not necessarily locally, bank wobbliness, are limiting the pace of the activity. Do you see that?
Anecdotally, from what I hear from developers, interest rates definitely are a factor, and what it costs to get a construction loan in the last year or two. There's also, certain materials are still more expensive than they used to be. I'm not sure the extent to which labor is an issue anymore. I don't know. But for a while, that was also slowing things down. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of on the cost side that has made these developments probably slow down a little bit.
Do you think the pace will pick up this year? I mean, what is left available?
Well, I mean, you can look at a map of Normal and you can see where there's undeveloped ground, and you can look at the zoning and see where that land is zoned for residential development or perhaps hasn't been annexed yet. So you could look at that map, and then you just have to ask yourself, well, is that land for sale? And sometimes you also have to ask, are there utilities available? Is there water and sewer adjacent? Not every property that isn't developed is actually easily developed. But we talk about that in our comprehensive plan, and we have areas in town that we consider to be very appropriate for development. It just turns out sometimes that the landowner isn't interested in parting with their property.
How many such areas are there? Put a sense of scale on that, would you?
There's a combination of maps in the comprehensive plan that talk about our growth priorities, and those the areas shown on that map show you which areas are most available for development based on being undeveloped and being adjacent to roadways that have been improved and utilities that are pretty much in place. Then you'd have to look at the land use map to see of those areas which are kind of set up for a future of residential development. And you'd find probably a few hundred acres, across the entire community if you were really looking. And then there's also the ability to ask for rezoning too.
Are there readily identifiable chunks that are prime at this point? say, by Heartland Community College?
Yeah, driving around, you can see which fields are still being farmed and not developed. The one you're referencing across from Heartland, our comprehensive plan does call for that in the long term to be primarily residential development. As of this moment, I don't know what the interest level is of those owners for selling it. I know, I'm not an expert on farmland ownership and finance, but I know it's complicated with how you dispose of farmland property and how that impacts your taxes, et cetera. So that again, that goes beyond what I really know, but I understand that does affect the timing of sales and that sort of thing.
This is Sound Ideas. I'm Charlie Schlenker. We're talking with Mercy Davison, the town planner in the town of Normal. That particular example is not quite on the edge of town, but it certainly isn't in the inner core of the town of Normal. Are there closer in things that the town has readily identified as infill opportunities or desirable for infill?
We typically wait for people to come to us with a proposal because we don't want to interfere with private property owners' plans to sell or not sell their properties. That said, we have, of course, looked at Uptown South as an infill opportunity because we own it, which is unusual. We don't have a lot of opportunities like that, but that is one for sure. When the Fairview senior housing project proposal came along a few years back, as you may recall, to turn the old sanatorium into affordable senior housing, we were very interested in that. That's a perfect infill opportunity on a beautiful site. So we're opportunistic. When these opportunities come along, if they're good ones, we support them strongly. But we don't have just like a list of, here are infill sites that we really want to see something happen with.
Well, those two examples, Uptown South and the Fairview Tuberculosis Sanatorium, and also the old health department site, same thing, have been identified as potential affordable housing, or in the case of Fairview, senior housing. Is that likely to move forward given the current interest rate climate this year?
As I understand it, the Fairview project is not moving forward. The group that had come through the public process to get the project approved locally was unsuccessful in getting the tax credits they needed from the state. And they tried really hard. They submitted more than once. We thought it was a great project. It didn't rise to the level of recognition by the state. The state has very few of these tax credits available, as I understand it, and they went elsewhere in the state. That project is not going to move forward. Uptown South, we have a conceptual plan that's really solid. We have not started to actively talk to anyone about ideas for that site. There's more to do in advance. We still need to do other types of planning for design guidelines and study the infrastructure, et cetera. But it is an opportunity, and that's going to, almost certainly go back to the issue of somebody out there getting tax credits from the state to do affordable housing, if that's the route that is taken.
Has it been discussed at the staff level whether the town should be offering local incentives rather than statewide tax credits to facilitate affordable housing, since that's been an identified need in the community as well?
I'm not aware of any discussion of that at the town level or just locally in general. The kinds of incentives that the state has available are pretty significant. That would require a lot of discussion locally if we were to try to make up for that with a local incentive.
What else needs to be said about the prospects for further housing construction and development in 2024?
We hear that the interest rates may stabilize or start to go down. That will certainly help. We have a very robust group of agencies and institutions that have been working together now for a couple of years on housing strategies, some of which is focused on affordable and some of which is just generally housing. The Regional Planning Commission right now is amidst a study of housing, and so they'll be hopefully releasing some results late winter, early spring, with some recommendations that should be really helpful for the community.
That's Normal Town Planner Mercy Davison. She spoke with WGLT's Charlie Schlenker.